everybody, this is Brett with the Indie Comics Dispatch, and broadcasting from an undisclosed location deep within the Milky Way galaxy. This is broadcast from the Dispatch. Good evening.
What's going on? What's going on? Doing all right. Glad to be back. Another Wednesday.
We missed you last week. You were off talking about something you have going on right now.
Yeah, I was off talking about my Kickstarter on Homebrewed's show. So Cypher Team issue 1. It's on Kickstarter right now. Links, you can find them in my social media bio. Or you can go to links.sovereigncomics.com to get to it. Right now, we're about $305 away from the next stretch goal, which is $2,000. So hopefully we'll get there before the days are up. But it's doing well. I appreciate everybody who has backed. I think a lot of these individuals I can start calling super backers, the Soverse super backers, because they're always there. Like for every Kickstarter, they've all come back. So, so I appreciate them coming back. I mean, you can't, you want the big numbers, but I mean, I gotta say, I'm grateful for the individuals who've come back to every Kickstarter that I've done. So that's dope. That says more to me than anything. So, but yeah, what's that?
What was your first Kickstarter?
My first Kickstarter was Temple High. So I did that Kickstarter, which is for, the title that talks about the youth of the Soverse, the individuals who have powers and everything like that. That was the first one. The second one was in Yamo Stigmata issue 1 and issue 2, which I learned from that to never do that again. That's the reason why I split up Cypher Team. So I'm doing Cypher Team issue 1 and issue 2 after issue 1 is done. And the third one was Stars, which actually had like shattered personal records. Like I had my own, the most backers for that one, the most amount raised. So I mean that was just dope, So it's been crazy. This week's been nothing but shows. Like it's like since Thursday, it's been nothing but shows.
In the Dispatch, right?
Yeah, but it's crazy. It's crazy. So I've been in between that, been getting some stuff ready to ship out. Got something that's coming to you that I'm pretty sure you're going to be ready to. You're probably going to talk about this when you talk about the.
Yeah. Well, and I got Kickstarter awards this week from Wingless Comics from their fall issue 1. So I got my Justice tonight.
I got that too. I read it last night. I think I finished reading it, or the night before. But yeah, it's a pretty good read.
So speaking of raising money, if you're out there thinking, hey, we like what they do, we want them to keep doing it, we have a Patreon just for that purpose. Patreon.com/Indie Comics Dispatch. If you're listening to this on the podcast and you can't see it on the screen, that CS of comics is replaced by Indie Comics Dispatch. Go there. You can support us for as little as $3 a month. We're trying to get up to 20 patrons within the next little bit here. That'll kind of allow us to start doing some really cool things. So some stuff that other people aren't really doing. So we are looking to get it up to 20. We have our 10. We're going to schedule our D&D game with Scorpio. We're not letting that.
We're just not telling him because he's going to disappear. So,
gosh, I have been looking forward to tonight's guest lineup for a while now.
Yeah.
And if you, Brian, where's my D&D night? It's coming. It's coming.
Is he? Are you gonna? Is Brian gonna be joining us? He's joining us for that, right? Are you joining us for that, Brian?
Brian, I am right here from Facebook user. That's probably Scorpio.
Yeah, Scorpio. He's trying to be sneaky.
So tonight we have Ask an Expert Night. We have 3 gentlemen on the show tonight who have done just tremendous things with indie comics. We were just talking, one of our guests we were talking about before the show is included in a Smithsonian Institute at the African American Art center of the Smithsonian. It was just really freaking cool. So I'm excited to get to them. But let me say, if you're out there watching this and you have lots of questions, ask them. And this is your chance to ask them. We try to get to as many questions as we have. We've had some submitted beforehand, but we do try to keep the show to an hour. So don't wait till the last 10 minutes to ask your question, because we might not get to it.
Exactly. Because some of those answers may be long. So
yeah, I'm thinking some of the answers to the pre-submitted questions are going to be kind of long, but we'll find out. So get those questions in the comment section right now, and we'll be sure to get to them. So without any further ado, I'll get to introducing our guests.
Cool.
First up, because he's first on my bio sheet, we have Jiba Molei Anderson, the CEO and creative director of Griot Enterprises, a publishing company / visual communication studio. Anderson is the creator of The Horsemen and curator of the 4 Pages 16 Bars, a visual mixtape anthology series. Volume 6 is currently on Kickstarter right now at about 80% funded, I think. And he is an expert in print design, publishing, and branding. Anderson has worked as a graphic designer and art director for companies such as Onyx Path Publishing, the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art, and Rogue Matter. Jiba, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for bringing me back on.
No problem. I loved my one-on-one interview with you, and when I was kind of polling to see who we should have on the show as an expert, you were a no-brainer choice. So thank you for taking the time to be here, man.
Definitely.
Next up, we have Mr. Keithan Jones. He's the founder and owner of Kid Comics, an independent publisher based in San Diego, California. San Diego. The mantra behind Kid is "The kid in you never dies." It is a constant reminder that our childhood spirit is the core of who we really are, no matter how old we get. Isn't that so true? In 2015, Jones established Kid Comics and his first publication, The Power Knights, which he originally created in 1982 as a child. I was only creating dirty diapers in 1982, Keithan. He regularly features his childhood creations, The Power Knight, at conventions around the country. Read The Power Knights at kid-comics.com. Keithan, welcome.
Welcome, Keithan. Yeah,
nice to meet you, gentlemen.
You as well. I think I was kicking my mother's stomach in 82. That's what I was doing. I was inside kicking the stomach in 82. Keithan, I think we met before at MechaCon, but I do know you're one of the first black indie comics that.
And you see it, Keithan, but I have a Power Knights poster right up above my.
And I have I think all 4 books on my bookcase back there.
Right?
What's that?
You did like the.
Yeah, I had the one mech story. Orisha Exos was the one mech story that I had, but since then, I breathed life into 4 other titles. So all the ones I had on my iPad that was coming soon, they're here now. They're here now. But yeah, you were. So this kind of a geek out moment for me because you were actually one of the individuals that I was looking at whenever I first kind of stepped into there. So this is kind of a geek out moment for me.
Wow.
To be able to talk to you up here. So
that's
definitely cool.
Doing well, coming along.
And finally, this evening, we had Mr. Robert Jeffrey II. He is in my hometown of Atlanta. He's a freelance writer who has worked for such clients as DC Comics, the Center for Disease Control. Sometimes those are one and the same. And Nito Tires?
Yeah.
He's the co-writer of Radio Free America, the writer of Retcon, Changa and the Jade Obelisk, the creator-writer of the Cliff Award-winning nominated Route 3, Volume 1, co-creator-writer of The Crossing, and the creator-writer of Mind to Avenge, the Book of Layla. He contributed to the Dark Universe, The Bright Empire, H Gunshots, and the Scribes of Neoda prose anthologies. He has also written for tabletop RPG game production companies such as New Agenda Publishing and Son of Oak. He's a graduate of the 2017 DC Comics New Talent Writers Workshop and is currently the editor-in-chief of BlackSci-Fi.com. You can reach him at www.robertkjeffrey.com. Robert, welcome, sir.
Hey, what's going on? In 1982, I was born on the south side of Chicago, so we were talking about 82. So
I wasn't the only one who was a baby or embryo.
Yeah. No, I was born on Super Bowl Sunday in the south side of Chicago. Yeah. parents barely made it to the hospital because they had a party the night before. But that's my life.
That must have been a conflicting moment. They're like, "Hey, we're about to make a touchdown. Oh, I'm about
Yeah.
what
Well,
you do? No.
the ultimate touchdown was the birth of their first child. Hopefully, hopefully.
You know what? That's exactly what it is. Keep saying that, even if they don't. That's
Exactly.
You know where I was when my daughter was born? I was literally right at the what was it? I was in the theater watching the second Transformers movie when I got a page or text from my wife saying her water had broken. I was like, "What?" And I had left my car at my friend's house. And so
Oh man.
trying not to make any noise in the theater, you know, talk, "Hey, can I borrow your car? Can I borrow your car?" With the guys, with the guys that came with. So that was every time I see that movie or hear about that or see Transformers, I think of that day.
Yeah.
Nice.
That as well.
So, gentlemen, let's get down to it. We've done the introductions. If you have anything you want to say at any point, just feel free to pop in. All three of you can answer a question, or if you feel one person sums it up well, that's perfect. We can just go with that one answer too. But the more answers, the better, because we got people watching. Again, if you're out there watching, go ahead and drop your questions for these gentlemen in the comments now. We'll try to get to them all before the end of the show, as long as it's appropriate, I guess. Make it about indie comics, right? Like, make it about indie comics. I love this question, and I think it's important to the indie comic industry as a whole right now. What makes someone a professional in the field of indie comics?
If somebody buys your work, you're a professional.
Like that?
There you go. There you go.
That's I was gonna say. Yeah, it's as simple as that. I mean, if you can get your script from a script stage to a published work and then sell it, that's the that's the biggest thing that I always tell writers is that we can go to comic book conventions and try to sell scripts if we want to, but that's not going to happen, unless people are looking for your work like that. But at least for writers, you need a completed work. Because the best we can draw is stick figures sometimes. So a completed work, and I think at that point, if you market it even without selling it, that's a professional. Actually, but yeah, the professional part. I mean, selling it is the icing on top of the cake or the cherry on top of the pie or whatever. So
Pie, I like pie better.
Bye.
I agree with all that. I would just add that for people who truly are doing it for the first time, not to be naive to the fact that you still have a whole slew of things to learn, because you're going to make mistakes on your way to being a professional. Yes, once you sell your stuff, you're technically doing the same thing as the so-called big boys, but at the same time, just like they went, they started small as well to get to where they are, and they made a lot of mistakes, trial and error. So don't get it in your head that there's nothing else to learn, and still be willing to take constructive criticism and understand that it is a business side. There's the passion of doing it, but like the gentleman said, the way that you do make that sale is understanding the politics of of business and understanding how to communicate, be personable, and understanding your budget and not over promising and under delivering and all that stuff that could happen if you're not paying attention to what's going on around. So.
Yeah, I would like to add an addendum to that, because Keith, you expounded on it quite nicely. If people buy your stuff, that's one aspect of being a professional. The bigger aspect of being a professional is getting to the point of people actually buying your stuff, right? As Keith said, and as Robert said, to an extent, the creating part is the fun part. You know what I mean? That's That's the fun part. Whether you draw, you write, I do the whole schmear, right?
Mhm.
So the creating part, no matter how much it's pulling your hair out, you know what I mean? If the story isn't quite coming together, or how you just want to throw your stylus away because for some reason your hand isn't working properly and making the art, that's still the fun part. The work part is the professional aspect of it, from the marketing to how you comport yourself, right, in the game and in the business, to how you speak to people, to how thick your skin is, to how open you are to expanding your knowledge base and change and whatnot. Because here's the thing about being a professional creator, right? People buying your art one time, that's a great thing, but that doesn't make you professional. If people continually buy your work because of your ethic, because of consistency, because of the intent in your creation, right? That's what makes you a professional.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
Exactly.
this is a personal pet peeve of mine. Okay, as somebody who reads a lot of indie comics and reviews them, not a creator myself, other than outside creating reviews, but editing. Do you think editing plays any part of being accepted as a professional?
Most definitely.
Yup.
Yeah. I mean,
Thank you. Just
And
wanted
I
to
know
put-
what you're alluding to. You read some of these indie books, and I've seen mistakes on all levels. Okay,
Yeah.
and that's going to happen. But some stuff is almost unforgivable. Certain misspelled words that should have been caught because it's pretty big on the page, and this is the one word you should have made sure it was spelled correctly. Or what else? I've seen bad scans of art. Like you could still see. I've seen stuff where you could still see the ruling lines from the art from the comic paper on the finished art. And I'm like, how did you miss that? That's pretty blatant right there.
yeah.
And it's just a general. And I've seen guys even excuse it as on the basis of well, I'm not. I just need to get it done or whatever. I didn't have enough time to do this, that, and the third. And I'm like, well, just don't
That's
put
the
it
wrong
out.
answer. Yeah.
No.
Because, the old saying, first impressions are everything. So,
Mhm.
it's probably better that you just calm down, wait, and do it when you get it, when you get it together, because you want to start off on a bad foot with the audience or your potential readers.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where all of us we're in the small press area, and at larger conventions we're battling for eyes from the larger publishers. So if somebody comes over to your table and does like the quick read through and sees a glaring mistake, or if they decide to pick up your book and they purchase the first one and you have like a 6-issue series and you have like a number of mistakes in the first issue, either way, you're not going to get those repeat people coming back, or you might get the people who might just pass by your table. Having an editor or an editing team, for indie book, even with indie prose, it's essential, because if you just read over your stuff and just say, even like 4 or 5 times, there are things that sometimes grammatically I miss, or story wise, plot wise, that I miss. And to say that if a person feels that they're above going through the editing process, you've already shot yourself in the head, at the beginning of the process before moving forward. So, never be above asking for somebody to look at your stuff, and don't just ask people who are going to be like, yeah, this is great, everything about what you do is so great. No, find somebody who's going to be constructively critical and help you to grow, and also help you to put out the best product possible, because it's kind of a harsh market to go into, especially when you're once again battling for eyes for people who are Wednesday warriors and are just used to going to pick up Marvel and DC. You want your stuff to stand out just as much as they do, as their stuff does. And not saying all their stuff is perfect, but they have years upon years of, experience and longevity and IPs, which are known within around the world. You want your stuff to be just on par with their stuff. So yeah, editors are essential for whatever you're writing. So, or creating or drawing or whatever.
Yeah, editors are key. In my secret identity, I'm a college professor, and and I teach art. So I've been through that tradition of critique and whatnot. People say don't get advice from your family because they don't know. Unfortunately or fortunately, I'm from a family of artists. So, you know what I mean? Of working artists, right? Even before I got into the game officially, I showed my work to my father because my dad's an architect and he's also a comic book fan. And this was back in '94 when there was no gray on his face and all that other good stuff. So, I showed him the work and he's like, do you want the real critique or do you just want the thing? I was like, nah, I want the real critique because I trust your opinion, right? And also because of being coming from that art tradition of critique and whatnot. And, my father proceeded to put down some tracing paper, break out the triangle and the T-square, showed me where my perspective was off, so on and so forth. And he's like, I hope you're not upset. I'm like, no, I came to you because I trust your opinion because this is what you do. You know what I mean? And it's like, me being your son, I see you do this. It's like the tools that you use, I used to make this stuff. So I want to, make sure that I'm on point, right? And that is a small example of what editing is. Okay,
you're an exception. You're an exception to the rule. Most artists are the oddball out.
I am. I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky. I see that all day, every day. I kiss the ground that I walk on. I had the family and I had that acceptance for it. For those of you who don't, you have to look outside. You know what I mean? You have to. This is also part of being a professional as well, right? This is kind of the kung fu part of it. Okay? You have to seek out mentors.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, mentors will not come to you, right? They won't. And even then, this is me speaking as college professor as well, right? Mentors are only going to want to deal with you, first of all, if the mentor sees that you have that spark, right? Mm-hmm. If they see that you have that thing underneath, no matter how good at the time or how bad you think you are at the time, right? If you have the right intention, that's going to come through. That's going to attract a mentor, number one, Number two, what's going to attract that mentor is if you shut up and listen. Sometimes, right? They are here because they've been here and they've been through this, right? So you have to put what I call the artist ego bullshit. You have to put that aside, right? In order to get that learning. And actually, that's the difference between the indie comics that resonate and the ones that fall by the wayside. That's how important editing is.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Definitely.
I'm going to pop this question. We're not going to answer this because I want whoever asked this to clarify a bit more the process of getting your comic published. There's, do you mean by a big publisher? Do you mean independently? Clarify that for us. If you're still out there watching, we'd love to answer that. But I don't know how to ask that.
It sounds like they want the steps to how you take it from concept to actually getting it published. That sounds like someone who's never done it and looking for.
Do you want to answer?
And their books on.
I'll take a stab at it. I mean, basically, in short form, start out with once you get your idea together and you write it down and plot it out, and then go ahead and we'll skip ahead and say that they got all the art done, right? Well, let me back up. Before you even start drawing your comic, you want to know the format that you're going to publish it in, as far as the size of it. If you don't know what the standard comic book size is, Google that, or go and actually measure actual comic book, get that information down. And that's important because technically you can do any size you want, but being practical about it, you have to think about the comic bags, how it's going to sit on the standard comic book store shelf, and all that stuff. So you want to make it easy for your potential buyers or store owners to be able to handle your book and place it and file it away and everything else they have to do with your comic. Barcodes, if you think that's necessary, you want to research barcoding so that it makes it easier for them to catalog your stuff and price it, through the scan codes and all of that minutia. But then the actual publishing itself, or you have to get it printed, right? So you want to research, depending on your budget, you want to research who fits your criteria as far as being able, how many books do I want to publish? How many can I afford? And of course, there's different prices depending on who you go with, but usually those prices are connected to quality as well. So the cheapest guy is most probably the guy that's going to give you I'm just generalizing, but the cheapest guy is probably going to be the guy you don't want to go with. But you do want to find something that you want to find that happy medium where the quality is well enough,
Mm-hmm.
and the price for that quality works as well. You know what I mean? So those are things to consider. But most of this stuff is just a keyboard play. Google all this information as far as like how to publish. I mean, it's just a matter of taking it to a print house, having the books printed, and then having a place to actually a point of sale, whether that's a Comic-Con, your website, Kickstarter. There's different avenues to get your book into someone's hands, and that's that's basically it in a nutshell.
I was gonna. Oh,
go
sorry.
Ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say also begin the process by praying. Just start with that. Yeah, but the other option is even if you don't decide to do like physical copies, there are like webtoons. There are web comic book portals where you can, if you do the art yourself, or you have a team, you could just basically post it up on these kind of widely seen web comic portals. I know, like I said, Webtoon is one of them. I know there's a comic book that I'm a big fan of called Kamikaze. That's pretty much how they do all their stuff until they combine all of their pages or story arcs into graphic novels, which they will do on Kickstarter. Shout out to Team Kamikaze. But it's another way to go if you don't want to necessarily do but eventually you will get to the point of what Keith was saying, that collecting your web comics into something physical, because unless you can just keep rolling like that and making free comics, you want to make some money off of it eventually. So, but it's another option to look at when you're initially creating your comic books. It's something that popped in my head. Actually, something I want to do myself. So, so I learned something today, I guess. So.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to how do you publish, right? I mean, that's an extremely broad question. The first question that you should be asking yourself is, what is the purpose? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish in this game, right? I see a lot of people, there's not one way to publish, and there are no shortcuts to publishing.
No.
You have to do the homework, right? And doing the homework So I come from like, an older tradition. I come from a time before the internet and things of that nature. So in terms of like learning the craft of comics, because comics are a craft. This is an art form, right? And also the business of it is an art form, right? So in terms of learning the craft of comics, I was out there reading the books, right? I got the How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. I've got the Comic Craft Guide to Lettering. I've got Understanding Comics. I've got comic book design. My library is sick with like learning about the craft of comics, right? And then another part of learning about the craft of comics is learning the business of comics. So, I also came up from the time it's like, I was a fan. When I was in college, I worked in a comic book store for a couple of years. So, I saw the ins and outs and the outs and ins, you know what I mean, with the whole distribution implosion till it just came down to Diamond, how Diamond operated. You needed 3 books in the can before you could solicit, so on and so forth. I've been through that. So I've studied that and I've learned that. And then what we have now is this great leveling of the playing field with the internet, right? Mm-hmm. And you have a great leveling of the playing field even when it comes to printing. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, I see a lot of people, they want to go to the traditional route, getting a whole bunch of copies printed, and they have them sitting in their crib, you know what I mean, till the con or something like that. I found early on the benefits of print on demand, right? And, I started doing that in the early days when it wasn't so good. I tried to figure out, different things. And again, this is coming from my experience outside of comics, of like working in advertising and things of that nature, knowing about paper stocks and, what looks good and what looks good, that sort of thing. And as print on demand popped up, and their stuff got better in the printing, what I did realize, again, with print on demand and all that other stuff, people are like, oh, it's low quality. I'm like, no, it's not low quality. It's that the people who produce the book don't know how to produce the book. They haven't really studied the craft, right? They haven't studied the craft of like how you arrange your pages. Mm-hmm. Lettering. I'm going to tell you right now, lettering for me, that is the difference between somebody who knows their stuff and somebody who doesn't.
Right.
100%. Yeah.
Lettering is visible art. And there, I know whether or not like a comic book is, in some ways, I'm going to be blunt about it, worth my time. Mm-hmm. Because it's like if the creator took the time, you know what I mean, to work on their craft and develop their craft, not saying that they have to be the best that there ever was coming out the gate, because nobody is. We always grow as we keep going on. But part of being a professional publisher, and this goes back to the editing question as well, is, understanding the craft of comics, understanding what makes a good looking comic, not what makes your favorite comic, but what makes a good looking comic book. There is a standard of design and packaging, and you look at that standard all the time. I can name 5 different books right now that are completely different genres. We can go from Superman to Crescent City Monsters to Sex Criminals to Razzle, you know what I mean? And even Archie, okay? 5 completely different books, 5 completely different genres. All of them follow the standard of the craft of comics and how to create comics. Mm-hmm. That's the number one thing. That's the first thing about how to publish comics. It's like when you look at comics and you want to get into this game, you have to stop thinking of it as a fan, and you have to start thinking of it as you're a student.
Right.
And the comics you're looking at is market research.
If I open like a Times New Roman, I close it. I mean,
yeah. So I mean, even with that, and I'm gonna bring this up, just being, obviously coming up compared to y'all. But I know I was told a lot that I was researching too much. Oh, you're researching too much. Just put the comic out. Researching too much. Put the comic out. How important would you say it is to research? Because I know me personally, since I did do that researching, I learned so much more. That helped me.
Actually addressed that because I was going to speak just to that point. And I mentioned this earlier. Everything Jiba, I hope I'm not pronouncing it.
Jiba, you got it right. Yeah.
Everything he said was on point. But don't get caught up in trying to be perfect before you launch your material, because you'll never get it launched, because you're never going to be perfect.
Oh yeah.
I made a lot of mistakes on my first book. One was I didn't take advantage of Kickstarter. I paid for my first book out of my pocket. I printed too many copies because I got, big eyes and got caught up in my own mind about, oh man, I'm going to sell X amount of books and this is going to be great. It was the excitement of doing my first book and starting my company, but not really looking at it from not understanding that I need to test the market a little more, as far as like, don't just print enough, see what happens, study the reactions you get from people, take that information and improve it on the next book, or go back and fix the first book. Because you can read all the little how-to books you want, but nothing beats experience. You're just not going to see what you should be seeing that first time out. It's almost impossible. It's just like the high school athlete, the superstar athlete goes to the pros, and now he's just another guy because he doesn't know what he thought he knew. You're going to take your lumps, you're going to take your bruises, and that's trial and error. So to your point, yes, research, because that's smart, but don't get caught up in not thinking that there's a finite point of information, and now I'm ready to go because I know everything because I read.
Yeah. I mean, and that makes sense, because even like you just said, I did that with my first book, Orisha Exos. You bought Orisha Exos. Yeah. He's the one who has the ugly copy of Orisha Exos. That book is horrible.
That's okay, because
but the thing is, like, my books after that. But the reason why I people ask me questions, because of the books that I have released, I've released like still not that many, 10 books, but I've released books now, and people ask me like, what do you think I should do? I'm like, well, research a little bit. Doesn't mean you stop, but research a little bit. And the reason why I said that is because when I did my first book, there were so many mistakes in that book that even though now my books are professional because I learned from those mistakes, I went and researched, I asked people questions, I got better artists, I learned how to letter myself and fix the problems that I had. However, like you mentioned earlier, that first impression put bad taste in folks' mouth now, so they won't even pick up the books that I have now, even though there are miles better.
You actually get negative feedback from people?
On the first book, yes, but I also got positive feedback too. See, I'm the type of person, I take both. I want to hear your negative, I want to hear your positive, because both of them are going to help me grow. Unless you just say, "Oh, that sucked," or "Oh, that's great," that's not going to help me grow. But the negative and the positive, especially if it's constructive, will help me grow. Right.
I haven't.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was gonna let you go.
Well, I was going to say, I have an addendum to that though is, and this is an experience that I get mainly online, not so much at the shows, is that people will reach out to me and just ask for an information dump about how to do everything. And one of my first questions is, have you used this thing called the internet to research?
Yeah.
So that's the thing. So there definitely is a thing against like doing too much research, because after a while you got to pull the trigger. You got to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
Right. And that is something that I advise people, because if you come to me and you've actually done some homework, then that lets me know, like, hey, you've done that. I am not the only source of information that you were looking for. Because when we were coming up in the game, just like like we've all mentioned, for me, it was going to bookstores and trying to find whatever script books I could find, or whatever books on writing I could find, whatever comic book scripts online that I could find for free. And once it all happened and you learn the process of making comics, then you go ahead. So that's something that I advise people who are coming behind me who are asking for, like, they want the full, kit and caboodle when it comes to writing comics or scripting comics. And I was like, dude, I got a 9 to 5. Like, have you done some of the homework yourself? But I'd be willing to offer advice to see if you've done some of the work yourself. The other part of that is, even now at the ripe old age of 39, I'm still a crackhead when I go to a bookstore looking for script books. That's just something that I need to feed, because one of the things that I realize is that as much as there's a lot of camaraderie, we all work together and this and that, I can lose a gig to somebody who is more up on the craft than I am. So to a certain degree, and this is a mindset that I had when I started working in journalism. Like, I will lose gigs because I don't stay on top of things. And I think that's within any industry. You could be a banker, you could be somebody in IT, you could be a janitor. If you don't continue to study your craft, then people are going to keep passing you by. And I think that I feel the same way, especially for people of color, in this industry. Like, you have to continue to study. You have no choice but not to. And within that period of time, continue to create, continue to learn. Like, if I go back and look at my first published book, Daddy's Little Girl, that issue is horrendous to me. I apologize for people who read that, but it just is what it is. But it was a good stepping stone. Those are the two things that I always tell people. If you're coming into this, study as much as you can, but then also continue to study even after you've put out like 10 books.
Right.
Agreed. And I agree with all three of your points, because if I wouldn't have released, I call it the ugly version. If I wouldn't have released that, gosh, who knows where I would have been at? Because matter of fact, Keithan was one of the ones who gave me pointers on that book. When he saw it, he was like, "Hey, change this. You can do this better with the letter, and you can do this, or get rid of the big, thick black border that's going around the book." But those type of things, those were what helped me. And then so I went back and I'm like, okay. And when I was getting these good and negative, I took notes that day, and then that was part of my research. And that's ultimately what I was getting at. Because even if you do the book and go out there and someone gives you your positive, your negative reviews, if you take notes, which I did, I hope when people get that information, especially from somebody who knows what they're doing, and they've been in the game longer than you, and they're giving you jewels after jewels after jewels, I hope you're taking notes. I hope you're not, so cocky that you're like, whatever. I literally sat down I was like writing, okay, they said do this. They said do that. Okay, they said have this at my table. Okay, blah, blah, blah. So then when I went to another con, I follow those. When I did my books, I follow those rules. And then I researched more. I got books that I didn't have before. Like, I'm a writer too, so I'm just like you. Like, I'm like, I need books on scripting. Like, I even went and got Panel 1, which is, the book on writing comic book scripting. It has different flavors of comic book scripting, because I wanted to transition from short story writing to comics, correctly, so that my artists wouldn't be all like, what are you saying, man? Like, this ain't gonna work, So, I agree with all of them, like the research and just doing it. But like, I've heard some folks where they'll tell people like, no, just put out the book. And I'm like, no, like, do some type of research. There's a little bit, like, you don't have to do it to the point where you're like frozen in your tracks. Right. Because that's what I did. And that's what a Research Exos was.
Part of this, part of what you're saying is also just having some common sense.
Yeah. Like, in this industry that is not always in great supply, so that, that's another thing. But like you said, common sense is, that's key.
Because they're right. You have to put it out there at some point, and get your feet wet, and don't get camera shy about it. Yeah. But I always say, the way I evaluate people is artists that I feel that are going to make it or not make it is by their natural enthusiasm for the craft. The moment I see, like what Robert is saying, man, at some point, I get turned off by people asking me stuff they should figure out on their own. Yes. Man. I'm the oldest. I don't know if I'm the oldest one here, but it looks like I am.
Well,
when I was a kid, there was no internet. Like, I found myself.
Keith?
Huh?
Were you born in the 70s?
Yeah, 71.
Okay, all right. You beat me by a year, so you are the oldest.
So, but, I was, a weird kid, I guess. I was at the library over there in the art section on the floor looking at Michelangelo, Leonardo, learning how to draw. I would read stuff on Hitchcock on how to how to tell a story, set up your scenes. Even though I was doing comic books, I would transfer that information to comics, but there was no one on my back making me do it. That's what I'm saying. And to me, that's the difference between the guy that's going to make it, even if he has less skill than you do, he'll make it because he really loves what he's doing and he's persistent, or she's persistent.
That drive.
That's got all the talent in the world, but lazy about applying it. He's not going anywhere.
Yeah,
that's 100% the truth. As an educator, I've seen it. You know what I mean? Like I've seen the ones who made it. I've seen the ones who don't. One of my heroes artistically is George Perez.
Oh,
and George Perez he's one of my heroes, not only artistically, but also in terms of like learning the game and whatnot. Like I've had the pleasure to meet him when I was starting out in my career. I had a pleasure of like rapping with him when, on his retirement tour and whatnot. But one of the reasons why he's my hero and one of my artistic heroes is because when he started out, and I have like books, his biographies and stuff like that. That's part of the research, like, studying these artists that you really dig. But, when he got into the game in 19 and whatnot, like the George Perez in 19 artistically was nothing like the George Perez of the New Teen Titans, which was nothing like the George Perez of Crisis on Infinite Earths, so on and so forth. Like he had weaknesses in his work in the beginning. And it was like at one point, one of the stories was like at one point, his editor was talking about all of his weaknesses. And so he did a White Tiger piece that addressed all of his weaknesses artistically. And it put him on the path of growth, and then getting into more, photo reference and things like that from the Logan's Run book. And, I've like I said, I've been reading the biographies, different facial expressions, different body types, so on and so forth. That's what, part and parcel, that's doing the research. That's the growth. You know what I mean? Is the evolution, right? A crucial part of the growth is knowing that you are not the best whatever out there. And you should never assume that you're the best whatever out there. Because the minute you start assuming that is the minute that you fall off. And I'm sure that there are I'm going to make some people mad about this, but Rob Liefeld is the perfect example of somebody who and never grew in his artwork. He never grew. Like
or
when
John Romita Jr.
Huh?
I have a
Brett has a
personal
thing
grudge.
against.
I have a personal grudge against John Romita Jr. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's one of my favorite guys.
I know that sounds like some on-site mess, but anyway, but when Liefeld first, came out in '88, I mean, we're around the same age. He was 16, something like that, doing Hawk and Dove, and that stuff was raw and rough. And I looked at that as a kid, as a teenager, and I'm like, he's got something. I'm gonna see what's gonna happen in a few years if he develops, and he never did.
But see, that wasn't.
But I think that's
look.
Too early.
John Romita Jr. and Liefeld are some. I would like to speak on those two artists for a second. Liefeld's strength was never the draftsmanship. The reason his stuff was so successful was he still knew how to compose a page. He was very strong with composing a page and making the graphics leap off the page. That was his strong point. And to a child's mind, it translated.
Right. Yeah.
And he was very successful with that. Maybe a limited success, but it worked for him for that time period.
Right.
John Romita And I would still say, and also Liefeld's a good designer as far as costume. I know he borrowed a lot, but he knew how to put it together. Like he has the vision. You can see what he's trying to do is what I'm saying.
Right.
And he did just enough to make it work. But with Romita, which is one of my favorites when I was growing up, he went through a lot of stylistic transitions himself. But
yeah, his earlier stuff was way better.
The reason that the guy continues to get work, and he said this is not me just theorizing here. He said his style is the deadline style. That's what he said. He calls it the deadline style. They know that this guy, when they pay him to do these comics, he's going to actually finish in a timely manner. Right. And that keeps him employed. He may not be doing super detailed work like Jim Lee or someone, but I guarantee you he's going to get it done. He's going to meet his deadlines, and that's what the companies, the bosses, are looking at him. That's why they hire him, you know. And he's great. And then, but as far as stylistic, I just think he's a great action artist. Like he's another guy who knows how to put a page together. He knows how to compose a scene. You know, your taste may not be visually may not be what you're into stylistically, but technically the dude can put a page together like nobody's business. Like, right. And that's what keeps these guys employed.
I mean, with Romita Jr., I mean, I personally like his stuff. I mean, you know, he's here's the thing. I think like he had a really great period, like his Daredevil period. I think his Daredevil period was peak. You know what I mean? And also I think part and parcel with Romita Jr. is who's inking him right now. You know what I mean? Who inks him and stuff like that. I think that helps him out as well. Romita Jr. for me is a great storyteller. Keith, you know, everything you said about Liefeld is true. you know what I mean? Like for a cat who's 16, 18, you know, and you look at Liefeld and you get excited and stuff like that. I mean, that's why he got, you know, what he got in the early 90s with Image, right? Because at least Keithan and we were of that teenage.
I was old enough. I was old enough to read a comic. Come on.
Well, I was going to say, for me, so it's funny. I mean, y'all talking about. I was there. Yes, I was there.
Y'all were there. Y'all were younger. So when you look at chances are,
ancient times,
we're looking at Liefeld, you were like, holy for holies, this dude is the dopest dude ever.
Well, so
he's like a teenager and he's doing this. I mean, Rob Liefeld was the comic fanboy's dream. You know, had the dream job as a teenager, made millions, you know, off his creations, so on and so forth. Cool when you're 18. Not so cool when you're 38.
That's what I was gonna say.
Well, like this little joker here.
You know, I'm gonna break in for a second and say, Robert, did you get your piece? Did you say which?
Well, yeah, I was gonna say. So, you know, for me, and it's really interesting looking at this from the artist's perspective, because you know when I was reading X-Men, and you know some of the Marvel books at that point, Jim Lee was that dude. Like Jim Lee for me was. I'm sorry, he was just my preference was his art over Liefeld when it came down to it. And like I said, that's just me. But when I look at the writing from back then, or if I look at some of the early, like when I went back and looked at some of the early Image stuff, I was just like, this stuff is beautiful, but as far as like the writing, I couldn't get with it as much, you know. So. And it's interesting because for me, like it wasn't until like, you know, maybe like the 2000s when I was starting to kind of look into this industry, you know, to break in, but also appreciating more of the writing was that's when it seemed like the writers kind of made that transition. So it's just like I can see what you guys are talking about, but it's weird. But because for me, between those two, and I love and respect what they did, especially with Image. because they burst out of like they took the reins of these positions that they had with, primarily Marvel, some folks with DC, and they were just like, let's just do our own thing and make that money. And it's weird because like now the focus, I think, sometimes is more on the writers, because you look at folks like Kirkman. Kirkman's about to get, he's at The Walking Dead. He now has Invincible. And then I'm looking at the brothers doing Excellence. I'm looking at all of these people that are coming through. Liefeld he was fun. I mean, he was fun to read, but I felt like when I was, as far as the storytelling, at least from a writing perspective or from a fan's perspective, that Lee and Claremont period is just one that I think kind of set the standard at times. He said, "Please stop talking about Liefeld." But yeah. That's I had the X-Men #1, thinking that was going to pay my way through college, and I was like, no, speculation, and all that good stuff. But
I'm not gonna talk ill of those guys ever, because you don't get Robert Kirkman without those guys doing what they did. You don't get all the great Image comics that are out now if those guys didn't take that leap of faith and believe in their own abilities to generate a company.
I have a question though. Speaking on what you just said, Keithan, do you think that because of what they did with Image, that may have been? I know we had indie comics prior to that, but do you think that may have been the what paved the way for a lot of indie creators now? Like looking at what Image did and what a lot of people are trying to do now.
Well, what Image did, you had indie guys who are true indie guys, but Rob, Lee, Jim, and the rest of them, or Silvestri and the rest of those guys were working for the big two, or primarily Marvel, and they were making Marvel tons of money, but they didn't own anything that they created for Marvel. And so what was happening at the time, prior to them, the Marvel comics, you remember there was a time where you didn't see the credits for the writer and the artist on the cover. You didn't know who did it until you opened the actual book and read the credits. So they were kind of just and then Marvel said this, and I've seen many documentaries where they just said, the editors at the time were like, it's about the characters, not the artists. It's the characters that are selling the book. But in that era, back in the late 80s, starting with people like Frank Miller,
John Byrne,
John Byrne,
and the rest of them, we started collecting those comics if those guys were attached to them. You know what I mean? Like, it was the artists were the stars back then. That's why they were not. That's why they didn't need to have that grade of writing. When it came to those Image comics, because the zeitgeist at the time was about the visuals. I mean, hence the name Image. It was all about that, the energy of being independent, the energy of sticking it to the man, the energy of just being young and reckless. And that's what people were geeked out about with the Image comics. Not so much it's not Warren Ellis or whatever, but who cares? They were caught up in the emotion of it all.
Yeah, what I wanted to add to that. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Keith.
Yeah, but once that all of that wore off and the speculation market popped and all of that, you had to get back to the quality of the book. That's a little more difficult to pull off. But they had still changed the industry by creating Image and doing what they did. They had still changed the industry, and it hasn't been the same since.
Yeah, I mean, what I want to say is, Image
Ramita run.
Yeah, with the 90s, for me, there were Image was a watershed moment. Milestone was also the watershed of the 90s, right?
Yeah, same energy.
Especially,
same energy.
Same energy. Yeah, definitely same energy. But here's the thing, because during that time, that's when I 100%, said I was going to get into comics by hook or by crook. Like when I was 10, I said I wanted to do comics, but the watershed moment of the 1-2 punch of Image and Milestone solidified it for me. Like Image showed that you could, Milestone showed that you could create characters that looked like you, spoke like you, felt like you, and they will be successful. Image showed people that you could have your own creation and get paid from it. Okay, so as Keithan said before, like the indie scene was there already, But in the 90s, the indie scene became profitable and the indie scene became kind of mainstream. It kind of was like the indie scene of comics was kind of like hip hop. It is like hip hop. You know what I mean? That's when the explosion, right? For me in that moment, the synthesis of Image, you know, people talk about Image. Yeah, Image was watershed. You know, Milestone was watershed for me. What was also watershed for me was after Image, they had a whole bunch of collectives. The collective that I was looking at was Legend, the collective with John Byrne, Mike Mignola, Frank Miller, because out of that came Sin City, out of that came Hellboy. You know what I mean? And also out of that came the quote unquote comic book auteur, the writer artist, right? You know what I mean? Artist that could actually write. And I wanted to be that guy. I wanted to be the writer. I wanted to be the artist. And so that was my guiding force. You know what I mean? In terms of getting in this game. So, you know, in order to be that cat, also what I turned out to be, not only writer and artist, but it's also becoming a better colorist, becoming a better inker. You know what I mean? Studying lettering, you know, being a graphic designer, studying packaging and the comics and stuff like that, in order to like really become that that person that, you know, and ultimately, I guess this is how my career is right now, because when I was young, I wanted to be somebody's favorite artist, right? To be honest with you, like when people talk about their favorite artists in the indie comic scene, they don't mention me. But the thing about it is like, I'm not saying that and saying like nobody likes my art, but what I am saying is that is because I realize people look at me as a creator, right? Like I'm not just an artist. I'm not just a writer. I'm all of those things. You know what I mean? It's like the end of the day, like I'm the one-stop shop. And actually it was because of the Legend crew that pushed me to become that type of cat.
Right. I wanted to add,
Keithan.
Okay, you mentioned Milestone, okay, and the difference between Milestone and Image, okay. Now, as it pertains to Black creators in comics, independent Black creators, that's almost a whole nother ball of wax there. That's completely different from the challenge that Image faced. Because Image, and they said it, we're basically reinterpreting the X-Men, X-Force, and the rest of the stuff they were already doing, right? Their versions of it. But the Black creators, and a lot of people to this day, they don't get it. We're not just dealing with the industry as is. We're dealing with breaking cultural norms. That's why I do a show specifically called Black Comics Day, you know, versus just Comic Con, because it's a necessary component to change the mindsets within not the white community or the Asian community or any other community, but in our own community, because that's our biggest hurdle right now. It's not, oh, the white man's got his foot on my neck, so I got to create Black comics. It really has nothing to do with that. It's more about changing the mindset of our own people to accept the intellectual side of us and not be embarrassed by it, and embrace it more and nurture it. Because right now we're judged by stereotypes. We're just, I was tall all my life, right? I was a tall guy. Of course, what question am I going to get? You play basketball?
You play basketball, yeah.
No, I don't play basketball. I know I can play basketball, but I don't play basketball. You know?
I get, do you play football?
That was the question I always got. Or, anything outside of the stereotype is always like people like, whoa, you do that? Or you do that? Or whatever. You know what I mean? And just making comics in general is hard for anybody in any race. But the thing that we're dealing with is a twofold thing. We're dealing with the same issues as any other creator would be, as far as coming from creating something and getting it to a point where people notice it. But also, we're dealing with preconceived notions of who and what we are and what we're bringing to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that extra challenge that we're dealing with. So in my case, I feel like I'm not only trying to walk through a door, but I'm also having to build that door to walk through it.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, what's
There,
interesting about
I'm
that?
sorry.
Oh, sorry. I just want to say that what's interesting about what you said, Keith, is like right now, in 2021, Black content is hot. As we see, you know, shout out to Black Panther. Black Panther, you know, opened the door to Black speculative fiction in the mainstream, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now, you know, then we got Watchmen, and then we got Lovecraft Country, right? And I've been saying this for quite some time. This is like the first time that the majority of Black America has had the opportunity or the, shall we say, the permission to imagine, right? And what's also happened is that historically, you know, the vision or the imagination of Black America was in the other's hands, if you know what I'm saying, right? And so what I see, and I'm sure you see it on the boards, we all see it on the boards and stuff like that, right? We go to these FB groups, they talk about being creators, and they talk about, you know, expanding the culture of Blackness in comics, and they wind up still talking about the corporate too, or they wind up, you know, they wind up still looking for representation from the other, right? One of the first things that I did when I created the Horseman is that I said I wanted it to be free from the root of Western superhero myth, which is predominantly Greco-Roman, you know what I mean? Also Abrahamic religions, you know, a bastardization of like Asian, you know, mysticism and Egyptian mysticism, so things of that nature. So that's why I went, and this is in '97 when I was in grad school. That's why I went and started studying and working on the Orishas. You know what I mean? And doing with the Orishas what Jack Kirby did with Asgardians, right? So it's kind of funny, you know. So automatically, I was creating these heroes that were sort of free from the gaze of the other. You know what I mean? That was completely within our power because we're dealing with a different type of mythology, right? And now I think for creators in the Black comics that are really popping off right now, like The Excellence, like Bitterroot, like Crescent City Monsters, like Spirit's Destiny, you know what I mean? Like you, Robert, with Mind to Avenge, you know what I mean?
Which is a good book.
Kind of the Werespider, you know what I'm saying? Like all of this stuff that's coming out is that, you know, these cats are making it happen because they're creating free from the gaze. You know what I'm saying? And the thing about audiences, as you were speaking, Keith, it's like other audiences are picking up on that. But our Black audiences are kind of tough to get to. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Luckily, like for instance, with the Horsemen, you know, I've got people, you know, white folks, Asian folks, you know what I mean? Like picking up left and center. Don't get me wrong, I get Black folks too. You know what I mean?
Right.
Part of that is because, again, of you know, the quality level, right? Because the quality level, I had to make the quality level at least DC or Marvel to attract Black folks to buy it. You know what I mean? Because it's like, you know, oh, this don't look like a DC or Marvel comic, so I don't want it. You know what I mean? So, like, in designing the package for the Horseman from Jump, logo, the whole nine, you know, I was like looking at DC Comics and I'm like, at the worst, I have to be as good as DC or Marvel in the presentation. At worst, you know what I mean?
Right.
But you know, I have to go above and beyond that. And that also kind of ties in, you know, people like, they talk about the representation or they complain about lack of representation, and they keep looking to the corporate too for representation. And I know all of us in this group has felt that frustration where cats are like, you know, where's the next milestone? Where's this? Where's that?
And we're here.
And we're here. And that's the thing. Like, that's why I wanted, like, ever since y'all went down this path, I've been wanting to double dutch into this conversation so dang on bad. And I'm going to try to make this short. Like, Southside Chicago.
Oh, no, Robert,
There he goes. Going back to Milestone, and I'm going to make this quick. Like, yeah, so going back with Milestone, that's what allowed me to realize that I could do this. Because in the letters page, it was black and brown, and it was just people who, I mean, no offense, but who weren't just white guys. That's how it was for me. And I always tell people that the Milestone number ones have much more significance to me than Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns and anything along that level. Those are my essential books, because they were speaking of stories that I was familiar with, but then also they were being created by people who look like me. In addition to that, when you go to these conventions, and it's the same thing like you mentioned with the Facebook groups, there's always this talk of, I need, give me, just like from the big two. And we are sitting over here. Keithan, I've seen you in this industry killing it. Jiba, I've seen you killing it. I've seen my brothers and sisters around us just killing it. And guess what? We're bringing quality material. And especially the running joke that I always tell people is that I don't have a set of business cards on my table anymore, because I got tired of people walking up with stacks of Marvel and DC prints, and then they would come over and they would complain about not getting what they wanted from these companies, and then they'd be like, "Brother, I will take your business card and I will go to your website." I will go, and then I would be like, "Look, you literally just told me that they weren't giving you what you wanted, and then you take a business card." It becomes a catch-22 with specifically looking at blurs. And now, and also there are a huge segment of blurs out there who support what we do. But if you keep complaining about what you ain't getting, and you haven't done the homework to find these places by going to Indie Comics Dispatch, which Brett wins. There you go. I know how to segue and stuff. You know,
nicely done.
One of those places, or go to blacksci-fi.com where we report about this stuff all of the dang on time. Definitely we run coverage on DC Comics, but just mixed in with that stuff, and as just as important and preeminent, if not more, is what we're putting out. Like, don't sit back and tell me that there ain't stuff out there. It is. It's a lot, and it runs the spectrum from, like you said, excellence to bingo love. Like, there's so much mixed up in there. Get out of here with that, and don't. And like I said, so now I just have people just take pictures of, like a QR code or like my social media information, because I was losing money on business cards because people kept saying, they were complaining about the big two and then take a business card and never do anything with it. Stop complaining. Do something about it.
There's two groups here now. There's the actual comic book collectors who actually collect comics, that Black folks who collect comics. Those are the ones I would say can do a little more homework in finding people like us. But the general public, that's the part where I spoke on earlier. I don't fault them for this, because they're the ones that we're out here in the first place to change the minds up. Those are the people who are not necessarily comic book collectors. And I've seen this with my own two eyes, but they are more forgiving, and they're actually the ones who are willing to take a chance on us.
Yeah, the general public.
The general public.
The general public. The general public of Black folk who are discovering this stuff and looking for this stuff. The cats who go to the cons for the first time. Those cats, those brothers and sisters give me love. You know what I mean? It's like they see that stuff and they're like, I never knew it could be like this. I'm buying all of
It's
this right now.
because they don't. Yeah, because
I'm giving it to my kids and stuff like that because we are straight up giving them what
they haven't seen.
Exactly.
But they haven't seen. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Like those purchases like make me happy. Like when you get the old timers coming up, like when you get people who are elderly, when you get people who are middle aged, and they come up and they say, baby, I didn't even know this existed. I'm like, well, here it is. That's the thing. Like see, those are the people I'm talking about who just take the business cards. No, and after complaining about what the other people aren't giving them, like I those are the moments I talk to my wife about. I'm like, I was able to give a kid who didn't know anything about Route 3, and of course not Mine to Avenge because that's bloody violence, but that type of stuff. And then what I do? I sit back and I say, based on that age range, go right over there to Tuskegee Airs. You have a little girl who wants strong, empowering Black women. Go pick up some sorghum and spear. That's what you do. That's where the camaraderie aspect of specifically Black indie comics comes in, and actually just indie comics, period.
Yeah,
I mean, but no, like I love those conversations where you can talk to them and teach them that we are doing this, and we've been here for a minute.
Right.
And there's so many genres too. Like the genres, like I've seen in some of those groups, like people saying, I need me some Black fairies. And I'm like, there's Black creators doing that. I need me some Black vampires. There's Black creators doing that. I need to see the Orisha or I need to see the Loa. And I'm like, that's the City Monsters. Agree out. I have Orishas that are mechs.
Well, but we are at the edge of the sword here. Like we're a lot of this stuff is just being, just like Jiba said, a lot of this stuff is just now coming into fruition. It's just now showing its head. It's just now starting to blossom. So a lot of the stuff I forgive, and I don't get on the internet and rant on these people like that because ultimately I want everyone to be a fan of this stuff. So I understand. Unfortunately for us, we have a lot of baggage around this. Being Black creators, it is what it is. I mean, that's part of our American history. Right. There's a lot of stuff we got to cut through just to get to the goal.
Well,
Agree.
Yeah, go ahead.
Agreed.
No. What I was going to say, that's definitely the truth. That's excuse me. Literally, why I created 4 pages, 16 bars of visual mixtape. It was because I had gotten sick and tired of the conversation. Like, we need a new milestone. Where the Black comics at? We need a new magazine with like Black characters and stuff like that. We need like one company. And I heard all of this talk, about what needs to be done, but nobody doing anything, right? And it was a round table interview like back in 2014 that I had with cats like John Jennings and Hannibal Taboo and Quinn McGowan came up in there and whatnot. And we brought this thing up again about this consolidated effort. And I was the one who said, like, well, what really we need to do is we need somebody who's connected to these people who could reach out, get this stuff together, who could put their ego aside, and it's for the project, it's for the unit, it's not for them. And and just has the wherewithal to put it together, construct it, design it, get it to market. And I'm like, okay, since I said all this stuff, I guess it's going to be me to do it. Like if you're going to talk about it, be about it. That's how I am. Right. And the whole notion of it, and to address that whole thing, like we need one comic book company. That's when I came up with the tagline: no, comics are hip hop. Hip hop is a culture. Comics, especially Black comics, is a culture. Yeah. Hip hop is not just Def Jam. Hip hop is not just Death Row. Hip hop is not just Tommy Boy. It's not just Cold Chillin' Records. It's not just Rawkus. It's not just Cash Limit. It's not Cash Money. It's not just No Limit. It's all of these groups, right?
Right.
Hip hop is as much Salt and Pepper as it is Queen Latifah, as it is No Name, as it is shoot. I mean, I could just go on and on and on.
We're not monolithic here. We're not
we're not monolithic.
Yep.
And so
we got villains, we got heroes, we got all kinds of folks.
the whole nine.
Happen to be black,
right? Yeah. That's what Ford Page's 16 bars became. It's like I say, like it's Heavy Metal Magazine meets The Source, you know, and that's how I exactly rock it. So it's like, luckily, you know, like Robert is a member, an agent of the Blacksis. Keith, do I have some of your work in there? Not yet. You're gonna be in there soon. You know what I'm saying? Like,
y'all need Power Nights. Power Nights is dope.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, don't like it.
Right. So I mean, no, seriously, it's like, you know, the mentality of the Blacksis, right? You know, that is like our universe. Not necessarily shared, like all our characters interact with each other, although they could, but you know, this is the community. You know what I'm saying? Like Black comics is the Harlem Renaissance right now. It is hip hop. You know what I'm saying? Like,
and we're not, you know, I've seen talk about one singular company and stuff like that. I'm like, come on, guys, it's not practical. You have people at different levels of their life, different levels of experience. You're not going to have a certified professional working with a guy just out of high school just because he's black or she's black. It doesn't work that way because you're impacting each other when you put this stuff out.
Yeah.
That's why, like, you know, let's go back to the beginning of this podcast when we were talking about what it is to be a professional. You got people out there that really push their First Amendment rights and just say whatever the hell they want to say on the internet. But they want these same people to buy their stuff. And I'm like, bro, you just pissed off half of your audience.
Exactly.
You're right about that.
You talking about the punk cat that was trying to launch that magazine? And
man, no, don't foul up this conversation with that thread.
Okay.
I'm not getting up here to name any names, but I'm just saying I see a lot of it of people letting their passion or their emotions get the better of them. And there's a time and place for these conversations, but the moment you cross over and calling yourself a business person and you want to make money, there are rules to the game.
Yes,
you know?
there is.
And if you don't think there's any rules, go out there and try it and see what happens.
Right. What does Jay-Z say? I'm a businessman, but it's not. I'm trying to remember the lyric, but yeah, I mean, well, that's the other thing. Like, we live in a day and age where social media is something that is a tool that we need that we can utilize to help kind of grow our careers and also grow our brand. But you also need to know when to step away. You need to know when to let your fingers stop flying across the keyboard. And that gets a lot of people in trouble. I mean, sometimes I might post something which I immediately know is stupid, and then I just pull it down. Like, it's just like, if you don't have the and like you said, that's where being a professional comes in. You know, you gotta realize that just as much as this tool can help you, it can harm you, and it has a long memory. It's just like
there's a difference between posting an opinion on a subject versus throwing insults to somebody. Like, that's the way you're trying to. The moment you insult somebody, they already stopped listening to you.
Agreed. Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how well put together, how true your statement is. They can't hear it because you just called them a jerk or whatever other name you came up with. You know what I mean? It's human nature. People are emotional. They have feelings. And, you know, people will listen to almost anything if you present it right.
That's the truth.
You know what I mean?
Very true. Yeah. Very true.
I'm going to break in here because we try to stick to an hour. We're at almost an hour and a half, and I know when to shut up and let the vibe go.
Too much knowledge. To do an hour. Too much knowledge in here to do an hour.
Fantastic conversation this evening. We had a couple questions on printing, advice on getting books printed. I'm just going to say check out 133 Art. That's all we're going to say about that. And then we're going to
sorry,
lightning round. this last question, after I remind everybody we do have a Patreon. If you enjoy conversations like this, help support us on Patreon. Help us keep getting great guests like tonight. And you get some really great rewards, including a Sovereign Comics Universe comic book for patrons 11 through 20.
I'll be sending those out tomorrow to you, Britt.
Thank you, sir. So final question. Let's do the speed round style. What motivates you even when you're afraid no one will get your story / character / book? Like you think maybe you've had this in your head, but maybe nobody else is going to get it. How do you push through? What motivates you?
I can jump in. I'm selfish. I'm sorry. Like I write, I mean, sometimes like if I'm not entertained by what I'm putting together, there's no need for me to keep creating. I'm sorry. Like I have to be entertained by it so I can, push it for, to the next step. So, selfishness. There you go.
Love it.
Dig that.
Love it. Anybody else?
He's right. That's something I didn't know earlier. Oh, you got someone sneaking behind you there.
I know my daughter. She does this every Wednesday. She doesn't just walk past.
Assassin's Creed, man. She's coming to get you.
Yeah, that's something I had to learn, especially back in the 90s when I was trying to still find myself. I got caught up into the whole, everyone has to draw like Jim Lee, or everyone has to draw like Mark Silvestri. Let me alter my style to fit the zeitgeist of what's going on, and you can lose yourself, and it's also a huge mistake to do to begin with. So to answer the question, like Robert said, don't think too hard. Just go with what already entertains you, what's in your heart, and let the rest of it fall in place naturally. Everything you do, total confidence in that you like it.
Yeah.
And that will translate to everyone else eventually.
Yeah.
Jiba, anything to add to that?
So in the beginning of my career, just like Keithan, we all try to mimic our favorite artists in the beginning until we find our own voice, right? And just like Robert said as well, it's like in the beginning, what I came to realize is like, you have no fans while you're creating something out of thin air. The only fan you have to satisfy is yourself.
Yeah, that is true.
Satisfy yourself, and you think, and you have put out that thing that you don't think exists. If you did it well enough, other people will pick up what you're laying down, right? And so in the beginning, what motivated me was faith. All right, 20-some years into this game, where I am now in the industry, being independent, it's about legacy.
Okay.
Love it. Gentlemen, this has been such an amazing show. Thank you so much for each being here. I knew it was going to be a great show, and you all did not disappoint. Thank you so much to everybody out there watching. It's the first of the month next week, which means Indie Comics Dispatch and Friends Night, which means it's not going to be nearly as knowledgeable as tonight.
No. It's just going to be wild and us attempting not to get kicked off of social media.
Yeah. So tune in next Wednesday night for a completely different show. But Jiba, Keithan, Robert, thank you guys so much for being here tonight. To everybody out there, we will be here again next Wednesday, 8:30 Eastern. If you are out there and you're like, hey, I like podcasts, there's a podcast version of the show. Go back and re-listen to it on all the major podcasting platforms, even iHeartRadio now. And check it out. There's some gold that's been dropped here tonight.
Oh, yeah.
And you need to listen to this show. I'm going to listen to the show 2 or 3 times.
I just say, like I was saying earlier, take notes. This is the show you want to listen to. Get out your notepad, get out your pencil, your pen, your Sharpie, whatever's your favorite writing tool, and take some notes, because this was a lot of knowledge dropped tonight. So
thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you, and thank you to Indie Comics Dispatch. Y'all doing the Lord's work. I'm sorry, like y'all are killing it. It's just like every time I look up on IG, I'm just like, oh, new review, and y'all.
This is part of the right?
What's that?
Oh no, you go.
Can I just say something real quick?
Mhm.
I really, and I've been kind of behind the scenes pet peeve in this. I more shows like this need to be more proactive and prominent in featuring indie artists, because there is that element that's going to get us to the next level where we're all trying to go. I mean, there needs to be a media component to the indie scene that people respect. Remember Wizard? You remember the days of Wizard magazine?
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
That was what that was. I mean, you looked at it, oh, here's the top 10 such and such books and top 10 artists and all this other stuff. There needs to be, and I'm not saying your show wasn't that, but right now I see a lot of these podcast folks out there regurgitating stuff that everybody already saw.
Yeah.
And that's why we are launching Indie Comics News this month or next month on IndieComicsDispatch.com. We have a whole website behind it that we are dedicated
to doing that.
Doing it and making a bigger, better indie comic community for everybody.
It's funny you mentioned it. It's funny you mentioned the top, because that's coming too. So it's funny you mentioned that, because that's coming too. So
I know it's like,
yeah.
This is the absolute fact, but it's a conversation starter, and
great. Yeah, that was one of our biggest things we wanted to do. We wanted to make sure that, because we said the same thing when Brett and I got together after we left another show that goes unnamed. But we sat down, we was like, indie, that's it. That's all we want to talk about. Black creator, indie creators as a whole, and also put black creators forward too.
Truth be told, even in the indie scene is what's popping right now.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Not just black creators, but indie in general is what.
I agree wholehearily.
Jiba's trying to get a closing word in here.
Like I was saying, with the whole notion of the comics are hip hop paradigm, right? As much as we are, as I say, visual MCs and literary DJs, we also need the crowd controllers, and we need the quote unquote digital radio to get it out there.
Yes.
So Brett and Tier, they're doing their part. They're being Bobito, out there. They're being thing.
Man, that's
best compliment we've gotten, Tier.
I know, right?
Like I said, y'all are.
You know what I mean? That's the real deal of it.
Yeah.
And like straight up, some of the other podcasts, Keithan, you're absolutely right. I don't watch that stuff. I don't care about regurgitating what happened on WandaVision. I saw WandaVision. I got my what I want to know is like what's popping in the quote unquote underground. I'm a backpacker. You know what I'm saying? Like J-Law Tribe, Roots all day.
We need the indie version or the comics version of Yo MTV Raps, because so many rappers from different regions.
I had a thought on that, and I have an idea for that.
You said all kinds of stuff.
Oh man, yeah, we'll talk. That's dope, Keith. That's a
Everybody out there watching, we're going to take this conversation behind the scenes now. Tune in next week. Guys, again, wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for carving out time on this Wednesday to be on the Dispatch and to talk indie comics and black comics in particular. Everybody out there watching, thank you for watching. And you're why we do this, to keep getting creators like this out there to you, so that you can buy their work and support their Kickstarter. And
spread the word.
Spread the word.
Like I say in my post, share if you dare. That's what I say in my posts all the time. So dare to share. And do more than just take a business card. Support these creators. Yeah, exactly. Stop that business card stuff.
So long, everybody.
Take it easy.